very much. So that was a little bit of fun with Cahoots. So I don't know, Jamie, if you can help us out about who the winner was, but if they can contact us, we'll be more than glad to arrange to get a copy of our book to them, either virtually or signed copy by snail mail. So if you could just either the winner contact us. Next slide, we'll have our email addresses, or Jamie, if you can connect to us, that's great. So I'm happy to be here at the Washington, D.C. chapter meeting, the largest chapter in the world. I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada, home of the second largest PMI chapter in the world. So I'm here with my colleague and co-author, Joanna Tivek. Philippe very kindly read my introduction, but Joanna has an equally impressive one. So Joanna, maybe you can just say hi and say a few words about your background as well, please.
Sure, not impressive as yours. So
yes, it is.
I started my career as a project manager in the project management office for a financial institution, and I gradually evolved in my career to a product development role. So for me, when I got to lead a team of developers for the mobile applications, I had the aha moment, understanding how the project management works, but then in a product development world and job, I realized that I had to focus on value for customers. I had to focus on the why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm developing these products and for whom I'm developing those products. So although I was very successful as the project manager, we sometimes get to the, in the details of how we manage projects and we forget why we do it. So I realized back then that I needed to expand my picture to the product management, to the product development, and realize that there is a bigger picture out there than the project. So I became very interested in product development and product management. I met Peter at University of Toronto. I've been teaching there since 2009, and we've been talking about product development and strategy execution. And this is when we realized that we are on the same page in terms of how strategies are delivered through the products, actually, and projects are just the engine to get that going. So we decided together to write the book GEMP, and from there we started to discuss on co-founding New GEMP, and this is how our collaboration began. And if you're interested in where my accent is from, you can guess. You can put that in the comments area to guess where I'm from. Because I moved to Canada in 2003 from, I can give you a hint, from Europe. So, but you can guess there where I'm from. So that's a little bit about myself. Peter, back to you.
Thank you, Joanna. And I see we've got the chat and the winner. So if you could just get that too. Okay, so what we want to talk to you this evening about is we'll give a little bit of introduction about products and how what we think of as product ownership and product management. So we just went through the Scrum little survey from a Scrum point of view. We don't typically agree with that version of a product owner. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. So we're in the middle of the introduction. We'll talk about how products are failing and why that is the case. We'll talk a little bit about strategy implementation and how, by the name of the presentation, that projects deliver products, but it's products that deliver strategy. We'll talk about the product lifecycle and how project management fits into that, and talk a little bit about the MVP and minimum viable product. I'll get it, should be valuable as well. So we'll talk about that to wrap up. If all goes well, we'll have a few minutes at the end for questions as well. So the outcome, we want to introduce you to a technique, and a description of the strategy implementation circle that hopefully you can use to put in a simple way together how organizations can implement strategy. Talk about the execution approach to support product development and how projects do that. And then talk about how project managers and product managers and owners should work together to support each other. Okay, so what we've seen today in today's world is that products are failing, and they're failing at an alarming rate. Some of the studies that we did as we were researching our book, Clayton Christensen, a professor at Harvard, who passed away unfortunately last year, talked about 80% of new consumer products fail in the first year. That seems remarkably high. Inzin Blackburn, who's a professor at the University of Toronto, talks about 70 to 80% of new grocery store products fail. Again, and I think that was in the first 5 years. So again, very high. So George Castellone and Stephen Markham got together to do a more thorough study about products failing, and they came up with, in their study, about 40% products failing. And even if we settle it's only 40%, that is still a very, very high number for any organization in this day and age to face. And just the failing of products isn't alone. In many cases, failing of products and a couple of products will lead to an organization having trouble. And I've got some logos of former organizations that were, part of our daily lives, and in some cases, one of the larger companies in the United States who are either failed or in bankruptcy. Right? So Kodak was in the top 10 on the New York Stock Exchange, now been in bankruptcy protection, and a mere shell of where it is. Of course, Blockbuster Video was on every corner of in every city, and now they're no longer around at all. We all talk about Netflix. Sears, we're used to for getting many of our products and services. Now we go to Amazon, and of course have to throw in a Canadian company, as Joanna and I are both based in Toronto, Canada. BlackBerry, which missed a little technology shift about 15 years ago, and now again it's in a shell of itself. So these companies all had products, and the products have failed, and thus led to the company having problems. So Joanna, maybe we can just share a little bit about why this is happening these days.
Yes, and thank you for those who answered the question. And Linda is correct. I'm from Romania. And Linda, if you send us your email address, we'll send you a book as well. So that's my gift to you for guessing. What we're seeing is that definitely there are these challenges out there. And I think this year in particular, we had one of our biggest challenge, which was the pandemic, which happened globally and disrupted everything that we're doing. But from our perspective, we tried to combine these challenges in 3 groups. And the one is the diversity. And it's just not any diversity, but is the diversity of our consumers, because they are spread globally these days. We can buy from anywhere in the world. We can have access to products everywhere, which is a good thing for organizations if they are ready to embrace that. Because with the diversity of your consumers comes also a diversity in your segmentation. So that means you have to serve the needs of multiple personas of your customers out there. So it's hard to please everybody. The other thing that we're seeing is business models. They became challenges for organizations because of the amount of change that is happening to them. It's very hard for them to adjust their business models. And it goes back to that discussion around strategy and how fast you can actually turn your ship around, if I were to quote a famous book, to make sure that you're changing your business models as fast as you can. We've seen during the pandemic, some of these organizations switched their business models pretty fast, and they were able to adjust. Making masks instead of making tablecloths, for example. Or we had a company here in Canada who in the GTA who quickly turned around, and instead of producing spirits, they started to produce hand sanitizers. And they changed their processes, they changed their model of how they distributed, and basically on the spot. So that gives you the flexibility to do that. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations are challenged by that. And the other one is the technology as a big disruptor. And we can see, you know, organizations like, for example, the taxi industry has been disrupted by Uber, who basically didn't own any cars. They just owned one app, and that app made what they are today, and basically causing these disruptions in the industry. So why do you think even these challenges are happening, Peter? What's going on there?
A good question, Joanna. We are actually, surprisingly enough, in a very interesting time in the evolution of our world and of the way that we work together. So there's 4 things that we see that are happening in the world today. So the first I titled New Renaissance, and this comes from a book written by Ian Golden and Chris Katana, talking about navigating the storms of the new Renaissance. And in this book, Ian and Chris propose that we're going through a period very similar to what happened after the invention of the printing press in the late 1400s. So with the invention of the printing press, suddenly knowledge became a lot more accessible to people, especially when you add in a library where people could borrow books. Prior to the printing press, everything was handwritten. With the printing press, you were able to create books and publish them, to store knowledge and share knowledge to multiple people. The argument they make in the book is that we had a similar revolution back in the 1992 with the invention of the internet. Because not only can we easily now more transmit information, you don't even have to print a book to get the knowledge, you just go online and read it, but you can generate information as well. You know, in our case, when we published GenP, we published it on Amazon. All we had to do was to format our document in a certain way to be accepted by Amazon, and it's available for you to buy online. If we had before the internet, we would have to find a publisher, negotiate with the publisher to publish our book. They may like it, they may not like it. There are certain setup costs that the publisher would have to take on to print the book and set it up, and then away it went. So this has all been eliminated. So the point the authors make is after the invention of the printing press, the 1500s, the age of the Renaissance, was an incredible period of innovation and creativity. Great arts came out of there, that period as well. But it was a very tumultuous period because it was changing everything of how people received their information. Their argument is that's what's happening today, is that we're going through a very tumultuous period about how we receive information, the type of information that we see, for good and maybe for bad. So that's one thing that we have happening. Second is the Industrial Age 4.0. So that's what this graphic is trying to show. So Industrial Age 1.0 was the use of power from water and from a steam engine to help manufacture machines to start mass producing produce. We can think about the looms in England, and so the first industrial age. That started in the late 1700s and went on in the late 1800s with Frederick Taylor coming in and Taylorism. We started thinking about manufacturing and consistency and standardization, you know, the scientific method and Taylorism, which led to mass production. And you know, out of that, we got some of the great plants in the US and around the world to produce products and services in a very, produce products, I should say, in a very consistent way. So the example I'd like to say out of this age was Henry Ford, who had a great saying in the early 1900s when he started manufacturing the Model T: you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And this lasted again for almost 100 years to the 1960s, when we started seeing the introduction of robotics into these manufacturing plants, replacing humans with machines who were in many cases a lot more reliable, a lot more predictable, and were a lot cheaper to, again, part of this optimization, but introducing robots to go through. And then now in the late 19 90s and into 2000s, we are now into the Internet of Things where the machines are talking to each other. So if I continue with my car example, where now, especially if you buy high-end cars, you can go to the dealer and you can start picking the various features you want on your car. And then that will be transmitted to the machines, the robots on the production line, and they'll produce your car with a unique combination of features that you want in your car that wouldn't be in the next car coming down the production line because of it got programmed to be what that customer wants. So that's the Industrial Age 4.0, the network of things which allows for a much more of a higher degree of customization. The next one is a 4-generation workforce. So it's not unusual to have multiple generations in the workforce, but what is different now is in ways some of the values of the generations. Myself as a baby boomer, not getting out of the workforce as soon as many people would like, as our life expectancies get longer, but the people coming into the workforce, the millennials and the Gen Zs, are having different values, a different approach to work than what the baby boomers did and the ages before us. So this makes for a very interesting workplaces. We've got this conflict of different values, but also diversity as well. And I guess from a product owner point of view, we also have to recognize the millennials are this growing group of consumers who have different values than those consumers before them that are older, and we have to adapt to our consumer values. And you can see some of that as companies getting much more interested in social good programs as millennials have a stronger interest in that. And the last one I'll talk about very briefly is human evolution. And in fact, I mean, Joanna and I have talked about this. I'm not sure if evolution is the right word, because in fact, what we're saying here is that Taylorism tried for workers to try to make them into machines. Well, now we've invented machines that will do that repetitive work. So we have to go back to some of the things that maybe we were very good at as humans, which is problem solving, creativity, innovations, so that we can solve with the problems of today and allow us to invent new products and services that will help deliver more value to our customers. Okay, and love it when Zoom moves around and covers things up on you. No, I want this over here so I can change my slide. Okay. Sorry, just lost the controls. There we go. Okay, so having said that, let's talk a little bit about the idea of implementing strategy. As the topic of our presentation is, products deliver strategy. But you know, one of the things that I've seen in my experience is organizations have a very good job of developing a strategy, but they have challenges in implementing it. I suggest to you there are 5 areas where they have challenge. First is culture. As Peter Drucker famously said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So that the idea here was that culture, the way we do things around here will resist change. Strategy is all about change, all about changing the organization to support new products or new features in products, support new customers. And with the way that culture is, it doesn't like change. So you have to think about, as you're going to develop a new product or service, lead a project, how are we going to help the organization and the culture of the organization change to support the project? How are we going to change the culture of our customers to be able to take on our product, our new product, so that they will use it and see the value in doing so. Second is structure. Organizations all have structure. We want to make sure that the structure is aligned to support the strategy, which may mean changing the structure, some cases flattening it, some cases moving people around to create multifunctional teams that will allow them to support the delivery of their strategy. Third is focus. Well, it's so easy today to get distracted by the events that are going on, with the new things that are happening in the technology area, the new business models that are coming into play, how your competitors are reacting to the new environment, opportunities presented by diversity that will distract organizations from their strategy. You've thought about your strategy, you decide to implement your strategy, let's stay focused on implementing it. And certainly organizations that use project portfolio management, which decides on making sure they're implementing the right project at the right time, are the ones that are going to be more successful because it helps them stay focused on strategy. And that's what we're saying here. The challenge is to make sure you stay focused and not get distracted by the noise that's going on in your community. Fourth is execution. Being able to do the right project at the right time, the right way, with the right people. So getting the projects done and selected to produce the products, and then getting feedback back from customers. And we'll talk a little bit more, Joanna will talk a little bit more in a few minutes about this idea of doing things in iterations to allow you to get feedback quickly in order to adapt to this very changing and dynamic environment we're in, as I just talked about. And lastly, not to withstand my earlier comments about focus, but you have to realize that the world is changing. The world is not static and changing at an ever more rapid pace. So you need to recognize that your strategy may have to change, or your priorities have to change, and be able to be flexible to adjust to that as appropriate. So yes, stay focused, but not blinded. Keep your eyes open to see what's changing and adapt accordingly. So one of the ways that I suggest that we can do this in organizations is use a strategy implementation circle. So here we start off with the strategy itself. And as I mentioned, lots of great ways to create a strategy, and organizations generally do a good job. From a strategy, we get strategic objectives, which lead to strategic initiatives, projects by any other name. So projects are should be designed and used to build new products and services to support the strategic initiatives. Well, how do they do that? So we do our project to create a product. The product needs to deliver value to customers. Customers will give us feedback, and from the customer feedback, we will either achieve benefits for the organization. Customers will say, we like this product, we're going to buy more of it. We like dealing with this organization, we're going to use their services more. We like the social good this organization is doing. We're going to tell our friends about it who support the organization. So they'll give us benefits, which will help support our strategy. Or they may give us feedback that says they don't like our product and services. They don't buy it, they don't use it, or they tell their friends how bad it is. Hey, all feedback is good feedback, because we can use that to inform our strategy as well, which is to say this may be on the wrong track and maybe we need to adjust our strategy. So based on our benefits we achieve or the feedback we get, then we can update our strategy and update the strategic objectives, and around the circle we go. So this idea of being continuously getting feedback from your customers to inform us how well we're doing on our strategy will help you implement your strategy. Okay, so just as a little example of how this can work, we're going to talk about a company called Infarm. They were founded by 3 fellows in Berlin, Germany, and they had a strategy to try to feed the cities of tomorrow by bringing farms closer to the consumers. They were concerned about, in the way that things were going, there wouldn't be enough land to feed everyone in the world, and about the cost environmentally of shipping produce all over the world and how fresh it was. So they came up with this idea to develop a vertical farm here. So they wanted to, as an example of one here, so they had an objective to install these farms in 100 stores in 3 years. So they signed a contract with Metro, which is a large grocery chain in Germany, the largest one in Germany, and the project was to install these stackable module climate control units into the Metro stores. Now, the units also had an app that was able to monitor their temperature and moisture, so you could keep track of it remotely. The value that they were delivering to Metro, the grocery store chain, is the remote monitoring, so they could be monitored remotely. They were scalable because they were modular. They provided an access to a variety of seeds so Metro could in fact grow the produce in their store, which what their customers wanted based on the region or the location of the store. And there was local food. There was food that the Metro customers could buy in the store that was grown in the store. The feedback they got was that they got themselves into 200 stores within 300 years, so doubling their objective. And they had over 14,000 LinkedIn and Instagram followers. So at the time, a couple of years ago, when this paper was done that I used to get the information from, this put them in the top 10% of LinkedIn and Instagram followers. So very successful. They not only were in more stores, but more people were talking about them. The result was that they were able to raise $100 million in venture capital to launch their product to come to the United States and to Canada and many other countries around the world. So this is an idea how you go from strategy through a project to a product to allow you to get benefits back to the organization. Okay, Joanna, back to you to talk a little bit about product life cycles.
Yes, and I think we have to remind everybody that if they have questions for us, they should put them in the chat. I see that James is doing that, but just, jump in. Don't let us talk, ask us questions. So one of the things that I told you at the beginning, I had the aha moment when I started working in product development that I needed to see the big picture. And this is what helped me be successful in the job that I was doing, delivering products to customers and understanding what customers actually need. So Boston Consulting Group put together this linear view of a product lifecycle. You probably are familiar with it. So I'll ask you a question. Can you guess where the project is in this view, in this life cycle? Where do you think the project fits? And in their view, like this is the linear one. And this is why they haven't been as successful as implementing this life cycle in organizations because there was no feedback loop. So it was basically just continuing to grow. And then at some point, the product was retired in organizations. Introduction and growth. Yes. So this is where, even in their view, they said that this product lifecycle actually started after the project was implemented. So when the product was delivered in the hands of the customer. So for them was, okay, the life of the product starts after the project is being delivered and is delivered in the hands of the customer, because we know that in the traditional way of working, we would spend many years to develop that product, and then we would do a big bang and deliver in the hands of the customer. So Peter and I thought about this, and we're thinking, okay, so we definitely need to show you a way of incorporating feedback. So one of the things that we did.
Sorry, I got ahead of you. There we go.
So next one. We were thinking about the three buckets, from a product lifecycle perspective, in an iteration way, iterative, and trying to incorporate feedback from customers. So the first part was the customer problem. What are we trying to solve for the customer? So asking ourselves, again, going back to that question, why? Why are we doing this? And the second one was the market validation and this was the first introduction of that product to the customer to actually validate that the product is working. So it's an initial introduction. And based on that introduction of an MVP or the minimum viable product, the minimum features that we can give to customers to actually test that product. And then it was started with the execution. So that's when the project actually started to happen in a more iterative way. So you can see in the next slide that we have, like a more detailed view of all these three bubbles. So again, it starts with that customer problem. So usually the product is born with an idea. So I have an idea. And especially during this pandemic and staying home, I think we all have ideas of products, and I'm sure they will emerge more and more. But that idea also needs to bring value to the customer. So before we find a solution for those ideas to implement them, we need to think about, is it really valuable for customers? Does it serve a need? Does it solve a problem for the customer? Then, as we talked about the market validation, you put it in their hands with a minimum number of features, and you test with them to see if they actually are willing to use that product. Are they willing to pay for the product that you're providing them? And that's the MVP. And then basically start the execution in an iterative way. And Agile, what Agile introduced and did a great benefit to the product was this flow of feedback. So making sure that we get feedback every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, as long as the iteration is, and basically incorporate that feedback into your concept and then continue to evolve your feedback. That's eliminating a lot of waste and a lot of features that customers actually don't use. So, this is an example of Zappos. Zappos, you probably know, was created in US from an idea that they wanted to basically sell shoes online, and everybody thought that they were crazy because they thought, like, who's gonna buy shoes online? Like, everybody's going to the stores to try them on. So they started with basically a website. And they had a huge success because they ended up with 2 million customers. And in 2013, they were bought by Amazon and by $1.2 billion. And they basically created an entire empire. And now Amazon keeps them separate. But basically a very successful story of how you start, from that market validation perspective, go there. It is said that they started with 10 pairs of shoes, and look how successful they are. So they tested that minimum viable product with the consumers, and they had a great success. And then they continued to evolve their product from there. So now, Peter, let's show in more detail the iterative approach.
Absolutely, Joanna. So the idea here is, those of you who are familiar with the Agile approaches, but we would encourage anyone, especially from who's not, to think about this, is you create a backlog of features, as Joanna was mentioning, that you want to include in your product. And then from your backlog, you want to prioritize your features based on those that are delivering the most value, at least as the initial pass, and determine how to put them together in iterations. So an iteration being a group of features that you can complete within one iteration or one sprint that will deliver value to your customers. So in this example, we're doing a little travel app for customers. So what we have is identified 6 features, and we've sorted them by value. So the first 3 is a login, logout feature, a display trip, and a buy trip, which we bundled together in iteration 1. Then the next 2, print trip and update trip, we bundle into iteration 2, and send alerts we bundle into iteration 3. And this would be a way for us to start our initial thoughts about how we're going to release the product. We could combine iteration 2 and 3 together to create a release, and put them in together as one release. But also, the backlog needs to be constantly revisited based on feedback from customers, as Joanna mentioned. So after release iteration 1, maybe we find out that send alerts is much more important than print trip. So print trip gets moved down in its priority. So iteration 2 could include update trip and send alerts, with print trip going into the 3rd iteration. Again, we want to make sure that we adjust this based on customer feedback and prioritize just before we start the development, ensuring that we're delivering the most valuable products to our customers. Now, Joanna, you mentioned about the minimum viable product in the previous couple slides ago. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, and I think we have a couple of questions. I think one was Jamie asking about the minimum viable product, and we have a slide for that. So basically, this is a typical slide. You probably have seen it out there, you know, in terms of what we're trying to achieve with a minimum number of features. So for example, if our objective is to deliver a transportation vehicle, and think about this, this is a transportation vehicle for our customers. So let's think about my 17-year-old who got his driving license and wants a transportation vehicle, right? In the traditional waterfall approach, we would basically gather a lot of requirements, thinking, you know, making all these assumptions about our customers' need. And we would basically make the assumption that the customer needs a car. The problem was in the waterfall that we would work so much on that and we would spend so much time to make that car available for them. So only in release 4, we would have a customer happy. You know, that they got something that they actually wanted, because before that they couldn't use that product that we would put in front of them. In a more adaptive or iterative approach, what we would do, we would start with the minimum features that we could deliver to that customer. And we can start with a skateboard. So you can see here, like our customer, the 17-year-old, may not be happy with this. Of course, my son wants a car, but trying it and using it, he might even love it. And some customers, they would be very happy with a skateboard. The next release, we can build a bike for them. More customers would be happy with that. So the next features that we would put there to build that bike would satisfy them, and so on, to the point that the customer will give you feedback in terms of what they really want. And at some point, you may realize that it's enough. In release 3, you may have customers happy with what you are giving them from a feature perspective, and you don't need to give them more. Or if you give them more, it's going to be on a different trajectory than actually building a car. Maybe they want a really fancy motorcycle. And this is where adaptive is actually going, you know, like this is just an example, but you get the idea of this, you know, releasing the minimum amount of features to them, getting their feedback and understanding what their needs are, what they want to see from your product, what problems they have, so we know how to resolve them. And the characteristics of the MVP are very simple, because the first characteristic, you want to make sure that you have a goal. So you know exactly what to deliver and what that value for the customer would be. And I guess we have a question here. Yes, value is very hard to quantify. And this is the biggest problem that organizations have, because it comes from their business models. It comes from their customers. They need to know their customers very well in order to understand what that value translates for the customer. Because maybe, you know, for a person like me, let's say that I use an Apple device. Value for me is in the security, is in the lens feature of my device, because I like to take photos with my phone. So the ease of working on my phone, you know, remotely. So that's value to me. And we really need to understand what the customer needs in order to quantify that value and prioritize those features based on that value for the customer, because those features will be definitely prioritized like that. They will be at the top of the list if we understand that 90% of our customers, they want the security on their device. Also need to think about benefits, and those benefits are what we're getting from the customers in terms of the purchases that we get, and then how we grow the organization through those benefits. Optimization, so avoiding waste is a big thing, because getting that feedback from the customers will save us from doing things that or features that customers really don't want. And there are stats out there that 65% of the features that we are developing through our products are not being used by customers. So for organizations, that's waste. Acquisition is another characteristic, because you are determining those segments that are really going to try your products at the beginning, and then they continue to try that, and focusing on delivering the value proposition. And this is, thinking about that value proposition canvas. So another way to determine value would be to do a value proposition canvas, where you map your customer to the product, and this is where you understand the value and you can easily quantify. So Peter, now let's wrap it up. I think we are at the end, and we want to bring it together, from a project management and product ownership perspective.
Thank you, Joanna. I'd just like to add, one of the things that we're seeing that organizations are using a lot to help with value, measuring value, is the Net Promoter Score. So most of us have received surveys that will say, would you recommend this product or service to a friend or a family member? And it's on a 10-point scale. That's the question for the Net Promoter Score. So again, it's a difficult thing to do, how to say value, because it is what the customer tells you it is. It does become difficult to measure. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, we believe that product owners and project managers have to work together. We're looking at product owners and product ownership, whether it be the title be a product owner or product manager, is being a person who is trying to shepherd the product through its life cycle. So a product owner needs to be worried about the product life cycle. They need to understand who the customers are and what is the value they're delivering to the customers, and listen to the customer for their feedback. And they have to be able to understand the features and how those features are both delivering value to the customer and benefits to the organization. This should be done, we argue, through, as we showed, an iterative product development approach, where each iteration is going to require a project team that will be worrying about stakeholders for the particular iteration, being worrying about selecting the appropriate methodology and approach to deliver that business increment, the features that are in the increment or into the iteration to be delivered, whether it be predictive or adaptive or incremental or iterative, but pick the appropriate approach to deliver that will get the most successful product at the end. Meet their project objectives, typically on time, on scope, on budget, but also making sure that you're delivering the features that were committed with the quality that you wanted to allow for the value to be delivered to the customer. And managing project risks. So together, just being able to, product owner saying, I want these features, and then having a project manager who can't deliver them, it's not going to lead to a successful product. Having a project that delivers a bunch of features on time, on budget, on scope, that doesn't deliver value to the customer, is not going to be successful. Both sides have to work together to produce a product that will deliver value to the customer. So we'll leave you with a final thought here, which is, so I've talked about projects deliver products, and products deliver strategic objectives, which will help the organization be successful. Okay, so with that, we've got a few minutes here to open up for questions. I'd just like to reiterate and thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts with you. If you want to find out more, you can go to our website, newgenp.com, or just email us at info@newgenp.com, or joanna@newgenp.com, or peter@newgenp.com. And our book is available on Amazon. So any questions or comments anyone has?
I'll go ahead and start it off. Can you go back to the last slide where you had the product owner and project manager?
Oops.
Thank you. And then we have volunteers also that are looking at the chat. So if you feel free, you want to ask questions, please ask in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand. When we're looking at this product owner, and then you may have mentioned this, but I wanted to make sure that we understand this. When you're looking at the, like Scrum, for example, they have a product owner that would take on some of this project manager role. But how does that fit in with the agile practices out here today versus what this model is? The Scrum
Yeah, so
Master,
I
et
think
cetera.
I think from our perspective, we recognize the product owner was a role in introducing Scrum, and I think that from our perspective, we'd like to make sure that every project, independent of Scrum or not, because even if you work in Kanban, you have a product owner, and that's important to own that product. Even in Waterfall, we should all consider to have somebody who can make decisions around the features that we are developing for the products. So the way we see it is that we are considering that it's a partnership at the end of the day, whether, and I see some comments here as well, whether that project manager is called the Scrum Master, it's called the Flow Master, it's called the Program Manager. The roles that we have in organizations don't matter as much as the functions. So we really need to make sure that the functions work properly and we understand what those functions are, as long as we have decision-making around the product, as long as we know that there needs to be collaboration with the stakeholders and most importantly with the customer, and we have to keep the customer close. Those, need to be set up first. And then if that's a project manager, or if that's a Scrum Master, or if that's another role that will come up, on the way, some other, methodology coming and saying, oh, we will call this something else. That's irrelevant. The most important thing would be the function.
Okay,
I'd just like to add, I guess, to the comment here about the product owner is usually the closest to the PM role. So actually it's very interesting, and I've challenged some of my PMI colleagues to think about this. Well, one of the things is, how will the PM role evolve? Well, I would argue one of the ways for it to evolve is as a product owner. That as if you look at a more of a Scrum approach where the iterations become very, very short, where does the project manager really fit in? It generally should fit in at the higher level, owning that product to make sure we get these cycles done and that you're collecting the feedback from the customer, you're prioritizing them and getting the right features done at the right time. Now, there could be other cases where you have on a construction project where you can still use an iterative approach. And many construction companies are doing that now. How many big housing developments or apartment developments have we seen where they'll put up a first phase or first building to get feedback and then modify the second and third phases based on customer feedback? So in that case, maybe you separate the product owner and the project manager because the project is being done in a more predictive approach. But I think on these smaller projects, there's an opportunity for project managers, and I would encourage project managers to think about the business side of why their project's being done and to add value to their organization, if I can use that word in a slightly different way, value to their organization, to help making sure that the product that's coming out of your project is the one that delivers the most value to your customer.
Yes, and I think these are great points. I think we can definitely work in collaboration. And from a Scrum Master perspective, what I've seen with the teams is that when they reach maturity, the Scrum Master basically is eliminating themselves. So they feel that they have no need to be there anymore. So in some of the mature teams that I've been part of, the Scrum Master didn't even exist because the team was self-organizing and self-managed, and basically those project management tasks just became part of the team, doing the team and focusing more on the product rather than the process, the process of monitoring and controlling and so on, that project management is about.
When when we're looking at this model and, you know, project managers, is there a risk of over planning? We have a project manager role.
Of over planning.
Yeah.
So I think that in any project, all projects, there's a risk of over planning that you do, right? And sometimes for some projects, yeah, you do have to do a lot of planning. I understand, right? We're not going to send a robot, a rover to Mars without using an agile approach. Oh, gee, I forgot this feature. Let me just go zip up to Mars and add it on right now. So there are some, but it has to be proportionate. And that's whether you're using a predictive approach or an adaptive approach or an agile approach. So even here, when we start talking about product, you need a product vision. You need to know where you want to go, but you have to be flexible enough to change your path, your journey to how you're going to get there based on the feedback you get and what's happening in the environment around you. And maybe you're going to move where you're going to go, right? So you have to think about how you have to continue to change and not over plan, but that's the case all the time. And I think sometimes we get too wrapped up in planning and trying to make things perfect rather than think about, let's use an MVP approach, let's use continuous improvement based on feedback. Joanna, do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, Jamie. I mean, at the end of the day, we'll see how the role of the project manager evolves and how, you know, how it will play in the field. We do feel that you know, we are encouraging that partnership for now. So at least, you know, work as partners because it's part of the team. So together with the team, that's why we have the team and the product in the middle. So the purpose there is not to compete against each other or is not to create processes on one side or the other, is to have, you know, the purpose of having a productive team and having a great product for your customers. So that should be on everybody's mind.
So Carson's mentioned one of Joanna's favorite topic here about value stream mapping. So absolutely, I mean, that's one of the roles that we see product owners. We do spend some time in our book talking about value stream mapping of product owners, looking at how to deliver value by removing waste, by looking at delivering value. I have another question from Nemo about, can the iterative approach may increase the cost of the end product significantly if, is it correct assumption? Let me just say a couple things. So there is a cost that's involved in delivering product and delivering features on a frequent basis. Certainly, if it requires you to do some changes in the processes and so on that's involved. That's correct. So this may not be the most efficient way, at least according to the scientific method of Frederick Taylor. However, you have to weigh this against the ability to receive value earlier and to receive cash flow earlier so that you don't have to invest as much in your product. And the fact that we're dealing with an environment, as I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, that is changing and changing dramatically and changing quickly. So what is the cost of spending 3 years implementing a new billing system only to find out that when you deliver it, the technology environment has changed and it doesn't work and it doesn't satisfy the needs, and you have to write the whole thing off. So there is that's becoming a more common problem that we're having is, as I talked about, products failing quickly because they spent too much time trying to build the perfect product and not adapting as they go along. So that's, I think, is what the challenge we have in today's world is. We're dealing with a moving target. I can't plan and build for a couple of years because where I'm going to is already gone. Joanna, do you want to add anything?
No, you said it perfectly. I think, like if we look at waterfall projects and iterative projects, I mean, it looks like we're spending more, but in the big picture, we're actually spending less. And this is tested and validated, based on teams working in organizations where they've seen definitely a reduction in the cost because of that waste that you don't produce, and then you find out that customers don't want to use those features.
It looks like we have time for one more question before we take our intermission break. If an organization, talking about culture, where upper management says to the project team or the agile team, where's your project plan and what are your dates? When are you going to be done? What do you recommend how to handle that?
Look at Jira or go and look at what the team is doing. So what I did with my management team, so I had the same issue, and I think we all have the same issue, right? So the management team, they want predictability, and this is what we need to understand. They want to see that you are in control, that you have a handle of it, and how do you have that through a plan? So when they see a plan, they think, oh, Joanna is perfect. She's a project manager. She knows what she's doing. Although that plan may be nothing, maybe, what I think it is. And most of the times that plan is changing so much, right? So how many times as project managers, we went into those meetings and we had to let them know that the plan is not working, right? In the middle of the project. But they feel that Joanna is in control. And that's what you need to start educating them and say, we are working here, the team is in control, the team is actually working, they know how to work this thing. So this is the work of the team, this is the estimates of the team, they know, they are the practitioners, they are the closest to the work as possible, and this is basically what they are telling us. So it's not Joanna, the project manager, who's putting the plan together, it's the actual team who's committed to deliver that. So I always invite them into sessions with the team to discuss about how we're going, showing them, full transparency of the Kanban board or the Scrum board that we have, and say, hey, this is how it's going. We are in the third iteration or the third sprint. We deliver so many features. We think our velocity is this, and we think that we will be delivering all these things for you in the next 10 sprints. We think. It's not a commitment. It's based on what we see. It's based on what we know. And we are all, here to make sure that this is happening. So it's back to that team accountability.
Peter and Joanna, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much, Jamie. And thank you for everyone for attending and all the great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.